will sit here. Yeah. Perfect. For this panel, we also have a significant audience following us online. So welcome, and welcome to the Tallinn Digital Summit. And first, we'll have a keynote, and then we will have the panel discussion. So Ulrik, can you please join us and deliver a keynote speech on the key findings from the report?
Thank you so much, Sarah. I have to admit I'm a little bit nervous today. Not because that I'm nervous about the solidity of OECD data, they're always rock solid, but because that just a month ago our roles were reversed and I was moderating a panel in OECD that was pretty lively with you on it. So I'm afraid it could be payback time now today that you are moderating a panel with me. But before you get a chance to grill me with your difficult questions and the rest of the panel, I'm really delighted to be able to present here today Volume 2 of the OECD Digital Economy Outlook 2024. And I want to thank our Estonian hosts, the Estonian minister, all of you for providing this beautiful platform for this launch. This publication, as has already, I think, been indicated by what we heard this morning, really could not be more timely, considering the speed and scale of the digital transformation, increasing and driving major economic and societal changes. Given the expansive scope of digital issues, this second volume of the Outlook complements the first volume, of course, released in May. It provided new insights into the key technologies underpinning the digital ecosystem. This volume addresses a wide range of digital policy themes to help policymakers unlock the opportunities of digital transformation and, of course, also to minimize its risks. To do so, it analyzes access and connectivity trends as well as the skills needed to thrive in the digital economy and society. It also explores how to push out the digital technology frontier by harnessing the still too untapped potential of women. Moreover, it considers how technological innovations can help reach net zero targets and contribute to protecting the planet. The Outlook further examines emerging issues related to trust in digital environments. That includes digital security developments and new trends in media consumption, attitudes towards privacy, and also control over personal data. Finally, a statistical annex includes key indicators on ICT access and usage. So enough advertisement for what's in it, and I want to turn to some of the key findings. And again, very delighted to be able to set the scene for the following panel discussion. I will highlight three foundational themes related to this important summit: digital policy priorities, digital divides, and trust. It's evident, I think, that digital technologies and data affect all sectors of the economy and every aspect of life. For government, that creates important policy challenges, including how to establish a policy framework that remains flexible and responsive to technology developments, but at the same time is coordinated across sectors and various policy areas. A key finding from the Outlook is that technologies are changing very rapidly. That may not come as a big surprise, but actually certain core digital policy priorities remain at the top of the agenda and have done so for quite some time. There's not a big change in that. As we can see on this slide, I don't know if it's clear enough, but actually digital government, connectivity, and skills were the top three digital policy priorities in 2023. That was for 42 OECD countries and partner economies. These three priorities that you see on the screen there have actually remained pretty unchanged since we started collecting this data in 2016. I think that's remarkable given the fact that the whole digital transformation landscape is changing so rapidly. These are your priorities. While digital policies tend to be technology neutral, some technologies have spurred governments to develop a technology-specific policy response. This is particularly true of new and emerging technologies for which the societal impacts may not yet be fully understood. Among the almost 1,200 digital policy initiatives that we collected across 37 OECD countries and 9 partner economies in 23, As you can see there, artificial intelligence and 5G are the most often cited technologies. They collectively represent actually 80% of all technology-specific references in these policy initiatives. So AI and 5G very much at the forefront of policy considerations. The next key finding I'd like to highlight relates to digital divides. And digital divides, of course, come in very, very many different dimensions by geography, across demographic groups like age, gender, income, education levels, and even by firm size. Not surprisingly, digital technologies offer economic and societal benefits, as data shows that firms using AI see a higher productivity. But this advantage relies on key complementary assets like digital infrastructure and ICT skills. A key finding from the outlook that we're launching today is that digital divides persist, and bridging them is key to making technologies benefit all people, firms, and places. And I would like to add here perhaps that as globalization, the big engine of the world economy over the last 2 or 3 decades, is perhaps decreasing, or certainly we see protectionist pressures and tendencies towards deglobalization. The alternative engine for the world economy and national economies that we have is the digital transformation. And we don't want digital transformation to be given a bad name because we're not able to spread the benefits like it happened with the globalization, at least in some Western European countries. So I think making sure that we don't deepen digital divides from the digital transformation is extremely important, not only for the vulnerable ones, but also if we are to have popular backing for the digital transformation across countries and the planet. For the next slide, I'll say that data in the outlook show that the demand for high quality and affordable broadband services continues to increase. Affordability, availability, and quality are key aspects of bridging connectivity divides. People living in cities in OECD countries enjoyed median fixed broadband download speeds 50% higher than people living in regions far from cities in the fourth quarter of 2023. So 50% higher broadband connectivity speed in cities compared to rural areas. That's one important divide. Also, if we look at the skills needed to fully reap the benefits of the digital transformation, there are basically 3 skills that we point to in the report. One is what we call foundational skills. That's like maths, reading, science, obviously important. Second one is more technology-specific skills, like how to use software, how to use AI. And then a third one is what we call complementary skills, perhaps even more important in a digital age, where more and more will be automized and AI can replace humans in certain functions. And that's those complementary skills are like being able to work in teams, be able to do critical thinking, and also have empathy. Basically, what we hope separates human beings from AI. Now, it's worrying that the foundational skills, math, reading, science, which are a prerequisite for the effective use of digital technologies, are on the decline across the OECD. The share of top-performing 15-year-old students in science, math, and reading decreased on average in OECD countries from 2012 to 2022. I think something we all need to worry about and do something about. Another concern relates to female workforce participation in the ICT sector. In 2023, women represented between 11 and 24% of all ICT specialists in the OECD. 11 to 24%. That's really not good enough. And while the current growth of female ICT specialists actually outpaces men, that's good at least, it will take a lifetime, in fact 87 years, to reach parity if the average growth rate we see now persists. Integrating more women and other underrepresented groups into ICT development would bring to bear the diverse perspectives needed to create a more inclusive digital future. Low rates of ICT specialists also contribute to the gender wage gap, as certain ICT specialist occupations, such as those related to AI, enjoy a substantial wage premium. It's also important to nurture female entrepreneurship and help women become ICT inventors. Digital innovation is key to economic growth, but women are still an untapped source. On average, over the last 2 decades, only 6% of startups in digital-related activities in OECD countries, funded by venture capital, were founded by women only. 15% had at least one female founder. So you do the math, that means that the rest, nearly 80%, were founded exclusively by men, as you can see perhaps on the graph behind me. That is remarkable as well, and not good enough. A range of policies we hope can support gender equality, but 3 key areas really stand out in which policy action could be particularly helpful in harnessing the potential of women for digital innovation. 1, closing the ICT skills gap. 2, promoting female entrepreneurship in ICT and related sectors. And 3, catalyzing female ICT innovators and inventions. Now, the summit will also address important aspects of the impact of digital technologies and data in making our world safe, secure, and trusted. The rise of internet and online platforms have changed the scale and speed by which lies, conspiracy theories, propaganda, and other false and misleading content can spread, creating real and rising risks to the safety and well-being of people and society. Through analysis and framework development, we at the OECD are actively working to address the challenges posed by false and misleading information and to help ensure information integrity across the information ecosystem. A key finding from the Outlook is that a safe and secure future requires greater trust in the information ecosystem. So we produced what we call the OECD Truth Quest survey. Sounds grand, doesn't it? A Truth Quest survey. It measures the ability of almost 41,000 people to identify false and misleading content online across 21 different countries. The results show that people correctly identify if the information they see online is true or false in only 60% of the time. So in other words, we're only doing 10% better than if we tossed a coin to determine whether something was true or false. Or put differently, 40% of the time, people cannot tell whether what they read online is true or not. 40% of the time. Helping people become better at identifying false and misleading content online is absolutely essential to mitigating its harmful effects and to fostering trust in the digital age. And while technology is certainly one part of the solution, people also play an important role. Data from the OECD Truth Quest survey demonstrate that reading more context about a headline does not always increase the odds of correctly identifying its veracity. This may indicate that media literacy initiatives should focus on encouraging people to seek additional information on third-party websites through what we call lateral reading. So not perhaps just exploring more from the same source, but seeking more sources. It may also suggest that people simply do not want to expend additional time to verify their understanding. That would pose, of course, other challenges for media literacy. To address the pernicious effects of false and misleading content online, we also need to understand how people consume information and what influences trust in media sources. Data from the OECD Truth Quest survey show that those aged 18 to 24 are 25 percentage points more likely to get their news from social media than those aged 65 and older, perhaps not a big surprise. They're also 20 percentage points more likely to trust this information, perhaps a little bit more surprising. On average, across countries, those who trust information on social media a lot demonstrated a lower ability to identify its veracity compared to those who trust the information a little bit less or not at all. Concerns about privacy online, not feeling in control of personal data, also reduce trust in the information ecosystem. Over half of the individuals surveyed avoid using certain websites, applications, or social media due to privacy concerns, a perception that actually increases with age, with income, and education level. In addition, 1/3 feel they do not have control over their personal information when using websites, apps, or social media. That's also a perception that tends to decrease with age. Media sources can increase trust by providing a high level of data protection and by giving users control over their data. Now, the policy information underpinning the outlook can be found in the new OECD digital policy platform. I'm delighted to announce that it went live just earlier today. This portal maps the main policies in countries' digital policy landscape, and it can be found at the address that you can see up on the screen, or maybe you can't see it, but it's called dep.oecd.org, so there's plenty of opportunity there to dive further into all these figures, and I've only been able, in this short span of time, to mention a few key findings. There's so much more to be found in there. The digital transformation has progressed significantly, but as is quite clear from this morning's deliberations, it also presents various policy challenges that we really need to tackle together. The OECD is very, very proud to continue to offer evidence-based advice, leveraging our multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder perspective. As I said, there's a lot more content in Volume 2 of the OECD Digital Economy Outlook 2024, so please do not hesitate to visit our website to find out more. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you. These numbers, some of those that you mentioned, are actually terrifying. I also teach at the university, and whenever I ask my bachelor level students, I had asked this room before, who of you read news? Please, show of hands. Right, okay, so this is the right audience where to ask these questions. When I ask my students, at bachelor level, 0 people read news. They get all their information from social media. Erkki knows this, but I had a job shadow a few weeks ago, and the only politician she asked me about is the one who's on TikTok. So this is a shout out to all of you politicians out there. If you want to appeal to young people, you need to go on TikTok. Okay, so thank you so much for this presentation. I'm sure you know it by heart. I still haven't read it. I might put it under my pillow tonight, so this is how I get this information. But I think it mentioned that digital government connectivity and skills were the top 3 digital policy priorities for governments between 2016 and 2023. So what I would like to ask the panelists, firstly, should a digital policy even be a priority, and what does it even mean? And what do you see are priorities for your government going forward? And maybe I'll start with you. You identify today as Ulrik, but actually, I mean, you're Paul, but it's okay. But please go ahead, just elaborate on this.
Yeah, no, thank you. Paul Wagner, the CEO of the Canadian Digital Service, and it's an honor to be here today in Tallinn. I think from a policy perspective for the Government of Canada, we established what we call the digital ambition. And the digital ambition speaks to what the government is looking to achieve, but it goes broader. It does speak to the private sector as well. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing and I'm learning, certainly from a lot of my colleagues, is that proximity between government and private sector is absolutely incredibly important. Not only from a practical perspective, but also as we develop policies, as we develop legislation, regulation. And so that digital ambition that we have, which you can, if you go to canada.ca, you'll be able to find it there, it's really rooted in 2 things, service and trust. And I think that's a lot of the themes that we're seeing here today around service, thinking about how do you serve your customer. And we talk about digital transformation. I think the word transformation has been overused. I think it's actually an evolution, right?
We haven't transformed by now, we're never going to
Exactly.
transform.
I mean, the OECD can tell us that with many details. Maybe in volume 3 of your report, you can do that. But I think, that service and trust, and it's interesting to see the word trust up there with concepts like connectivity, like innovation. I think thinking about trust and what that means to citizens, what that means to your consumers, and what that means to a country has become incredibly important. And I think having that dialogue, whether you're talking about a new service that you're putting out to serve your citizens, or even in the language that you're using to describe how you're going to go about changing the way you deliver services, that trust, and in Canada we've seen that trust, as I'm sure in many countries represented in this room, we've seen that trust ebb and flow, certainly over the pandemic. During the pandemic, the government was seen as one of the greatest trust purveyors, and that fell away the longer that went on, and we had truck convoys and strikes and all sorts of things in Canada that made a difference in the way that government was perceived. And I won't be so naive, and I'll finish on this, and Minister, I'll let you give an Estonian perspective, but I won't be so naive to think that digital can change that, but it's incredibly important that as we start to deliver services and think about innovation and scale, there's a digital divide there that we need to be careful of, is that we can innovate very quickly, but we have to think about, can we actually take that innovation and scale it? Does it have the privacy, security considerations that our citizens expect? So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you highlighted one of the most important topics, which is trust. I think in Estonia, we have been quite successful, maybe perhaps even thanks to the digital services that people trust those services. So are we ready now? What are the next policies or priorities?
Yes, thank you. For us also, as already mentioned, trust in the services, especially in e-services, is crucial. If people trust it, and it has to be as easy as possible, and it has to be transparent. Otherwise, usually a lot of the people, starting with the elderly ones, it seems like a black box. You don't know what's happening there, so the system itself has to be as easy as possible. And going back to the start, we're actually really happy to see the OECD outlook, that because it's really important input for our policy making as well. If we're talking about skills, connectivity, transparency, that's all crucial elements if you want to succeed in e-services. And for example, let's take connectivity. Estonia is quite rural. And we actually, if we want to have businesses, people living rural areas, then the connectivity has to be great. If you want to do business outside the capital or biggest cities, if you don't actually have access to internet, then you can't have those kind of e-services. And unfortunately, looking yesterday's and today's news, connectivity, we have to think it even across borders. We saw what happened. We don't know exactly yet, but we saw what happened, and we know that even connectivity throughout countries is a crucial element of starting with cybersecurity, starting with sharing the data, and actually having those kind of services. I can't even imagine a day where Estonia, for even one day, don't have those kind of e-services, starting with e-health, ending with e-taxation and everything. So for us, definitely, e-services is our crucial pillar for the public services. And I'm actually really, really glad and happy among all the 38 countries that were surveyed, Estonia allocated the most money. We allocated over 3% of our GDP to the national digital services and systems. So I'm really happy about that, but we can't rest on that. We definitely have to look forward, what we can do on our personal government and so on.
And
in this age of misleading information, let me confirm what the minister said. You are number one when it comes to investment.
Ulrik, do you want to comment on this as well? But before you do, I mean, I think it also said in the report that Estonia has one of the cheapest internet available in all of the OECD countries. But if you would ask any Estonian, they would say it's expensive. So I guess
you should come to Canada. Yeah. Come to Canada, we can compare.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to what Paul or Erkki said?
No, I mean, I can't speak for one specific country,
Exactly.
so maybe just a few words on the importance of international cooperation. But I will say that Estonia really is a shining example on this, not only a European leader, but really a global leader in many of these issues. So an example for many of the other OECD countries and also countries beyond our membership. The Prime Minister this morning mentioned Bletchley Park, the first of the AI action or AI safety summits. He mentioned the Hiroshima process under the G7, and I think he also mentioned the Global Digital Compact that was agreed at the UN summit. And I wanted to maybe just spend a minute on this need for international cooperation, because it's not easy and it's a crowded space. You could also mention the OECD GPI integrated framework. We have a summit coming up in Serbia in 2 or 3 weeks. I launched with the UN Special Envoy for Tech, Amandeep Gill, in New York also 2 months ago, a new UN OECD collaboration on AI. So there's a flurry of initiatives out there, and in some ways that's good. In many ways it's good, because we need interoperability, we need cooperation, but I will also tell you that I don't think that the new digitalized world economy will be a globalized one. I think it'll be a deglobalized one. We already see within the OECD that there are very different approaches to governing AI between, for example, the EU and the US. And if we compare, for example, with China and Russia, they're completely different.
Do you think there could be a global governance?
So to be honest, I don't think there will be a global governance like, for example, we see with the World Trade Organization, where we have one set of rules that we all go by, because the approaches are too different. You know, there's the old saying that when you ask around the world who owns the data in this world, In the US, they will say, well, the market owns it. In Europe, you'll say, well, the consumers own it. In China, they will say, the party owns it. And in much of the rest of the world, these developed countries, they'll say, what data? We don't have any collection of it.
Even data, yeah, anyway.
So that's very different. So that's why the key word is probably going to be interoperability. So if we can't live by the exact same regulations, at least we can perhaps, if we agree on certain definitions, and if we're transparent, we can maybe make them interoperable. So as we trade and as hopefully globalization doesn't die completely, there will still be a chance for data and goods and services in this digitally enabled global economy to still move across borders. I think that is what we should aim for.
Yeah, I can only agree, because what we see in the upcoming years, that data is new oil or new coal, as you say, because it has a lot of value, starting with these like health services, going forward if we want to succeed, I don't know, in global markets as well. But there is a problem that every country sees the specific data usage way differently. I've already experienced that. But may I add one thing, that as I already mentioned, are we ready? Definitely not. And where we see one big challenge is definitely the skills gap. Yep. We see that if we want to succeed, if we want to grow Estonian economy, ICT sector, we have the prognosis that we need over 18,000 new ICT workers here. That's a lot for Estonia. So definitely we have to think through how we're going to change the education system, what kind of labor policies we will have. So everybody has challenges in different levels only.
It's, you know, from the skills perspective, if I give you a Canada sort of view on that, thinking about, you know, the provinces and territories that are in Canada, it's almost like the EU. When you think about trying to get people to and governments to align, and you know, thinking about the skills portion of that. So in the Canadian federal government, we have about 30,000 workers in the digital space, and we have about maybe 30% of that is vacant. And so, you know, 10,000 people that we'd be looking for. The problem is those 10,000 people are also, you know, those gaps, those vacancies also exist in the private sector. And so, you know, I think the opportunity that we have both as governments to work together, because we're solving the same problems. Agreed that the contexts are different, the policies are different and so forth. But I think that the globalization, which I agree with you, Ulrik, that we're not going to get to that point, but could there be a globalization of talent that could actually enable all countries to actually advance, maybe not all get to the level of Estonia, you'll always be a couple of yards ahead of us, but I do think there's an opportunity, certainly locally, thinking about how do you permeate between private sector and public sector, and then more nationally and internationally at the government level. And
I think the worst case scenario is if the public and private sector become competing with one another. Right. So this shouldn't be the case, right?
Yeah, it actually should be the opposite. Yeah. Where what we have done in Estonia, starting with the 90s, that we actually had a really good cooperation with private and public sector. The private sector gave the initiative. Usually what it is, as a politician, I can say that usually private sector has more initiative. They want to try more. Usually governments are a little bit more conservative. That's understandable. The government, the countries usually are conservative, but we have to see where are the interacting points, where actually private entrepreneurs can give more insight and innovation throughout even public sector, and that's what we have done in the digitalizing Estonian different services. Most of the innovation have come from the private sector, and we have implemented it onto our public sector.
But I think this takes a lot of courage, and I will give you, because Canada was one of the first countries to actually import partially the Estonia's internet voting system, yep. Right? Estonia copy-pasted its ID card from Finland, with the difference that we made it work. And so, I mean, there are so many governments who are actually courageous enough to take and copy-paste from each other, and this public-private partnership, which you highlighted and which has been highlighted, is crucial. But can we retain trust in this environment where we say we learn from other governments, we take the private sector solutions? What does it mean then for the public sector? Do companies and individuals still trust the public sector?
No, I agree, and I just want to underline what the minister said. When we talk about digital divides, when we talk about trust, how in the world would we be able to improve on those parameters if we did not have public-private cooperation? I mean, how are you going to get rural connectivity speeds up without some kind of collaboration or dialogue. How are you going to get more female entrepreneurs? How are you going to get more girls and women into STEM education if you don't have some kind of positive interplay between the public and the private sector? It can't be done, and the same goes for trust. So I think it's absolutely crucial that we understand that this is multi-stakeholder challenges, and this is certainly an arena where public-private collaboration is important. And thus very good that we have everyone assembled here today, thanks to our Estonian hosts.
But it can't be also done, traditionally. Again, I'll use Canada as the example in ministry. You're absolutely correct in terms of the innovation coming from the private sector. I think if you try to create those partnerships and those relationships with the procurement processes that most governments have, you will never get there. I mean, we certainly see that within Canada. The procurement process is the way to engage private sector is through a very laborious process where you can ask a question about what you're trying to achieve, then you put out a request for proposal, and may the best company win. That doesn't sound like a partnership to me. And even when you come out the other side of that, to create a partnership out of that is you're created a transactional relationship. And so I do think there's a separate path that's required for digital, for service delivery, that's different from buying pens and warships.
But actually a point, sorry for now, I'm advertising Estonia, that one of our competitiveness initiatives is actually that we want to see innovation procurement in public sector as well. We have agreed already that 2% of public procurement, we will do innovation procurement, right. Because otherwise, it only measures price. That's mostly it. But if we need innovation throughout public procurement, then definitely, then the key factors have to be something else, and we are doing that. And I'm hoping that we will have a really good success story on that also.
Let me just take a look at the other side of the coin, of the coin that is called trust. Trust towards government, but then you spoke about the false information. 40% of people have a hard time recognizing whether some information is actually correct or no. And this spreading of misinformation, especially in the age of digital security, things we speak about, how do you maintain this as governments? I mean, how hard it is to speak about digital skills in the era of misinformation, and how do we tackle this? Is it regulation, is it education, or is it something else? Paul, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a combination of both, not surprisingly, right? But I do think, when we talked about, I think Minister was you that brought up, the word transparency. I mean, that transparency, around what you're doing in government, what happens. Let me ask audience participation. How many people have dealt with a cybersecurity remediation? So the after effects of a cybersecurity event. Okay, so the people that have your hands up, everybody else go find them at coffee break, and they'll tell you a pretty sad story of what that's like. But that's, from a trust perspective, and we've seen this in Canada when I was the deputy CIO for the country, I unfortunately oversaw a number of cybersecurity events where we had to come out and talk about what was happening. But that increased the level of trust in government because we explained what was going on. It wasn't something that the media reported and then we responded to as a government. We owned the narrative. And I think as governments, we have a responsibility to own the narrative around digital literacy, especially as it comes to government services. And I think that starts to permeate other sectors as well, whether that's the academic sector, whether that's the private sector. I think in countries where, certainly when we're talking about democracies, where you can come out and own that narrative, it's really, really an important piece.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. It is a mixture of different things we have to do. First of all, it all starts with education. Ability to think critical, to actually analyze the information, what you are getting. Like the most frightening development has been, we have also seen different surveys that how people trust what they read in Facebook or in social media a little bit more what they see on national broadcast. So that's the frightening thing, that what can help, definitely one thing that we can do as politicians, we can be open and transparent about it. We have to talk that, yes, unfortunately, there is a lot of misleading information in social media. You have to report it. We don't want to change the social media, but what we have to do with governments and with the biggest platforms, we definitely have to work together to find ways to tackle those kind of really complex issues, because it's not like one size fits all, definitely not. So this is something that we have to think through, but it can't come like a government's initiative. Otherwise, it feels like we're trying to see like people not to think freely. No, we actually want people to get the right information, qualified information, and make their decisions on that, not vice versa.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you have the overarching view on this. To see that governments are doing the right thing, or what do you recommend us to do?
I don't want to be over dramatic, but basically what is on the line here is the future of our democracies. Yeah. You said it in the beginning, Sandra. Some of your young students, they never look for news. They get everything they know about this world from social media. And if they're only able to distinguish, truth from lies in 60% of the cases,
so that's bad.
How are we going to have a well-functioning democracy in the decades to come? So I don't have all the answers. I agree with everything that's been said so far. We have to look at media literacy. We have to look at education. But maybe, we talk about the digital transformation and all the risks from it, but maybe there could also be some of the solutions found here, like AI could perhaps help us fact check and avoid misleading information. So it's not all bad, right? It's going to be one big battle between some of the risks and all the benefits from the digital transformation. And we cannot, with the proliferation of news and information on social media, we cannot manually fact check all of that. It's just a losing game, right? So we need also there AI to help us check some of that. So again, I'm actually pretty hopeful that some of these new technologies can help us overcome these challenges.
And if I may add, we see in all the channels that unfortunately the disinformation does not come from the friendly neighbors. There's actually a really huge security, geopolitical risk at these also. So we have to think, and as I already mentioned, we definitely have to be, I don't want to say brave enough, but we have to be ready to speak openly about it. How it can actually affect our society, how it can affect our mindset and everything. So that will be definitely one of the key issues to tackle in the near years to come.
Perfect. Being honest about it is the only thing that creates trust. And I think I can summarize what you said, that we need to fight fire with fire. Yeah. As simple as it is. Thank you so much. I wish we had more time, but thank you for this excellent panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.